G'day guys, Tom Craig here. Welcome to my podcast, The Help Side. Now the help side is a term in hockey that refers to the other side of the pitch, away from where the ball is and the action happens. And in the same way, the aim of this podcast is to give you, the listener, an insight into the other side of elite hockey players, to hear about their highs, their lows, and what makes them tick. We'll also hear about the journey they went through, from having fun in the backyard to playing out their dreams on the world stage. So whether you're a player, a coach, an umpire, a parent, a fan, or just a fan of sport in general, I'm hoping this podcast gives you a window into the world of elite athletes, and even better, encourages you to get more involved in our great sport. You can hear the chat we had last week and others you may have missed by searching The Help Side on any major podcast platform. And if you want, you can like and subscribe our page to make sure that you're up to date with the most recent episodes. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get to this week's guest. When it comes to champions of our sport, they simply don't get any bigger than Rechelle Hawkes. Winner of an incredible 3 Olympic and 2 World Cup gold medals, Rechelle was the captain of the all-conquering Hockeyroos, who during the 1990s swept all before them to become arguably one of the greatest teams of all time, not just in hockey, but across any sport. In 2000, Rechelle joined Dawn Fraser as one of only 2 Australian women to win gold at 3 separate Olympic Games. And in 2018, she was made a member of the Order of Australia for significant services to hockey as a player, captain, role model, and commentator. From growing up in country Western Australia to reading the Athlete's Oath at the Sydney Olympic Games, Rechelle's story is one of resilience, determination, and extreme dedication that saw her reach a standard of achievement that quite frankly may never be seen again in our sport. If you're interested in leadership, teamwork, and what it takes to win, then this podcast is for you. This is the help side of Rechelle Hawkes OAM. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce a very special guest we have this episode. She's an absolute superstar of not just Australian hockey, but world hockey and also world sport. Probably the most well-credentialed person I could ever hope to have on this show. I'm here with former Hockeyroos Rechelle Hawkes. Rechelle, how are you going?
Very well, thank you. Thanks, Tom, for having me.
No problem whatsoever. I'm going to start with the Sydney Olympics because that is a memory that's etched in my mind. It's hard to believe that was 20 years ago. And that was where you beat Argentina in the final. You threw your stick up in the air, as did the rest of the Hockeyroos. And that was it. 3rd gold medal wrapped up, career over. How do you remember that moment?
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's certainly etched in my memory because going into that particular Sydney Olympic Games, I knew it was going to be my last campaign as you plan for your future post-hockey career. So it was always going to be one of the most memorable games, given it was a home Olympic campaign. The last one was 56 in Melbourne. We weren't quite sure how it was all going to pan out in terms of the preparation for the games. There'd been a lot of speculation that Sydney wouldn't be ready and they wouldn't do it justice, and certainly arriving at the village and getting a feel for village life and what it was going to be like. Any concerns I might have had about the games were certainly dismissed pretty quickly because I knew this was going to be something special, and it delivered in spades. And going into that campaign, it was always going to be pretty tough because we'd been ranked number 1 for a number of years and won every major tournament other than the Champions Trophy leading into Sydney, which was in Holland. And by the way, that was kind of a manufactured loss to try and make sure that we delivered in Sydney. So there was bit of gamesmanship that went on there. So that was the only tournament that we didn't win, and went into Sydney with high expectation and absolutely brilliant Olympic Games overall. And the team played pretty consistently well. And then, of course, getting to the final, it was against Argentina. And as you mentioned, we managed to prevail and ended up winning that game 3-1. And yeah, the gold medal was ours. So a lot of hard work had gone into that preparation, as you know, and we got the rewards I guess we deserved because of all the effort and sacrifices that we made.
That's really interesting. And I'm going to pick up on the manufactured Champions Trophy a little bit later because that's something that I haven't heard about, and I'm very, very interested to
Mm.
hear about that. Have you picked up a hockey stick since then?
Look, I did very briefly. I started my career playing hockey,
Mm.
not a career, but playing sport for the love of it, and hockey at the age of 6. And so it was a long journey, a lot of heartache along the way with injuries and things like that. So it was time to give up. And then I was coerced into coming back to play a couple of club games because the team of choice at that time was North Coast Raiders, and played a few games, and they ended up making sure that they didn't get relegated. And then that was it. I said no more. It was really quite a hard journey in 2001 to play about 5 games. I hadn't really done a lot other than my own personal fitness. And as you know, playing hockey, you need to be training all
Yeah.
the time to play at the level you want to play at. And the other thing is, I just thought, well, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to play at that level or be as fit again. So I really didn't want to play hockey for the fun of it because I would get frustrated. And so took up golf and other sports. And, you just think for the moment you're going to carve out a career in the next sport. But time catches up with you, age is not very kind. So I didn't manage to end up having a golf career after hockey. But that was the only time I've picked up a hockey stick other than coaching,
Mm.
and it's quite funny when you're coaching kids and things like that, and as you mentioned, Sydney 2000, some 20 years ago. So as I referred to, age isn't kind, and try and do some of those drills and demonstrate to the kids. And at times it's been quite embarrassing. You don't have the right footwear on, which is not an excuse, but you try and do a tommer and you slip over and it's embarrassing. And like, they're like, what is she doing? I could do it better than her. So yeah, there's been some challenging moments in trying to replicate some of the skills that you once had. And as I mentioned, age is not kind, and it's been quite an interesting, funny journey coaching, that's for sure.
Right. Well, we're going to go back to a time where age was kind to you. Not that it isn't now, but back in the day when you were a kid, my
Yeah,
sources tell me that you were born in Albany, Western Australia. Um,
correct.
and was it always Albany growing up, or at what stage did you move to Perth?
Well, we had a bit of a journey in our youth. I have 2 other sisters, so 3 girls in the family. Poor dad, he didn't get a boy, but some would say I made up for that with that tomboy sort of attitude and playing every sport and kicking a football with the next door neighbours and playing cricket. So in some ways he got his boy from a sporting perspective. But we stayed in Albany for 2 years. Dad was a policeman, so we had quite the journey. Lived in Albany 2 years, then moved to a wheat belt town only about an hour from Albany called Ongerup, and stayed there for 3 years, and then moved to another town which is only an hour northeast of Perth called Wondowie. Stayed there for 3 years and spent a large chunk of the latter stages of primary school and early stage of high school in Northern, which was only half an hour up the road from Wondowie, which is just an hour and 15 northeast of Perth. And then finally, when I was in year 10, going into year 10, moved to Perth and went to Hollywood High. So, yeah, we had quite the journey, and clearly a lot of country people love their sport, and I played everything from your basketball, your tennis, your netball, your squash and your hockey. And then once I got to Perth, as most people, when they have that desire to play elite sport, other sports get in the way because they clash, and I had to make a decision. So I was playing, when we moved to Perth, tennis, and I played basketball. Thought basketball a bit short, need a bit more height on me, so decided hockey was the way to go. Mum was a big influence. She'd been a hockey player and started up a junior hockey association in Wondowie. They didn't have one, so she was very much an integral part of that, and her influence really guided me into hockey. And that's where I started to, I guess, get a real taste for what leading into elite sport would look like, and start to really get a passion for wanting to represent my state and country.
Mm. Hockey's a pretty difficult sport. I can imagine you probably excelled at all those sports you tried. Is that the case?
I was okay. I was all right. Hand-eye is not a problem, but certainly I wasn't great at dance or aerobics, and it was something that was new at the time. And I remember going to some fitness class, and it was very much about that aerobics type style, and I would always go at the back of the class, and I was so uncoordinated in terms of rhythm. And yeah, but certainly anything with a bat and a ball or a stick and a ball and basketball, it was fine. But yeah, take me away from that general sports arena into dance, and I was hopeless.
And you weren't always remembered as, or you weren't only remembered as a fantastic athlete, but also one of Australia's most well-credentialed leaders. Is leadership something that you kind of fell into while you were young? You were always in positions of leadership, or?
Yeah, look, I guess the leadership, some of the players that you in a team with love your leadership style. I think with leadership, I think it's quite true that you don't have everyone, because in the change room, because there's aspiring leaders, there's people that might not like your personality style and you might clash with them. But I think leadership about, even if they might be aspiring or they don't like everything you do, if you can take them on a journey with you and they'll follow you, I think that is the hallmark of a leader. And I really did fall into it, and I was appointed by Rechelle Hawkes, and I think he thought I was an okay leader but didn't have all the qualities, that he was a pretty hard man to please. And
Mm.
on reflection and some of the commentary that's sort of been gone around Australia and the world, actually, because there's a book that's been written by Sam Walker about the captain's class, and Rick was not exactly complimentary, but but in saying that, I think if you talk to a lot of the players, they would have a slightly different view. Not all of them. Some of them would agree with him, some of them don't. But I think leadership to me is about being able to take the majority of the group on that journey and having them follow you, and you lead by example. And within within a team and your leadership group, you have different personality types, and I certainly was a doer, and I would get on with it. Minimalist, didn't need a lot of words, but just would lead by example. And then we had others who were the mentors, the nurturers, the ones that really brought the younger ones along. And then you had people who, oh, what about this idea? The strategic side of things, the strategists. So you've got to have that leadership group that is reflected in different personalities. And whilst I probably wasn't the greatest leader in the world, I certainly gave it my all, and didn't have to say much, but by my actions, I think that then inspired the team to
Yeah.
do things, and that was, I guess, the strength of my leadership.
So if we talk about team building very quickly, I mean, the team that you and others managed to build through that 90s is like I guess the All Blacks, the current day All Blacks of times gone past, and one of the best teams to ever kind of walk the earth, putting it mildly.
Yes.
In that team building, so it requires the sum of parts, right? Is that what you're saying? So
Yes.
you were kind of like an inspirational leader. You did your work on the field and those sorts of things, and you had other people around you filling in the areas you perhaps lack.
Yeah, absolutely, those gaps, because I think most leaders don't have all of the skill set. You just can't, and you have different personality types, and I think within a leadership group, you've got to reflect them. They couldn't have all of the same leadership group that was similar to me, because it just wouldn't work. You have to have different types of personalities. But our group certainly reflected that, and I think some of the key parts to our success were the fact that we had a strong core group of players that moved from one Olympics to the next, and I think you have to have that. If you don't, very hard to, and that creates sustained success, because you have got this group moving through, bringing other ones along and leading the way. And so some of my leadership style in training was about the hard work. I was really keen on working hard and then bringing others with me, and get a bit sort of disappointed if people weren't trying and things like that. And then there are the others where training session might have been a bit hard, and you'd get someone who would say to the young one, it's okay, you're still developing, you're still learning, you didn't do your best run or, you know, your best fitness test then, but it's okay, you'll get there. And so those nurturing ones. And then the others in deep discussion with the coach about, well, this penalty corner, I think, you know, we really need to look at this. This side is really weak in this particular area. So that's how we sort of created that success. And then we had girls, and let's face it, in sport, the mentally tough survive, and especially you go to Olympic Games, it is different. There's more pressure that you put on yourself. The public, if you're ranked in the top 3, they expect you to medal. And so that pressure, you need to be able to deal with that. And I think we had a group of girls, as I said, a core group that went through the journey, and they were also mentally very tough, very tough. And a lot of people have sort of looked at the current team and how the Hockeyroos were when we were successful. And a lot of people have said to me, there was a certain mongrel about you girls. You one, believed in yourself, but you didn't take any prisoners. And as a collective, you might not all get on, but representing Australia, you were bound by that, and you would all protect each other. And I think that really shone through. And we wouldn't give up. We knew that we had the game plan through, obviously, some good coaching that we were afforded within the group, but we had a game plan that if the chips were down, our core group would lift and bring everyone along with them. And they were some of the key ingredients to success. And the fact that we were adaptable, the fact that we had innovation, it all, you know, comes together and helps make for a very successful team.
There's a lot in that I want to pick up on, but one thing that in particular, I spoke to Katrina Powell a few weeks ago, and Trini said similar things to you, but the thing that really resonated was that you were incredibly tough as a team, like incredibly, incredibly tough, not just as a unit, but even on each other. And there was kind of an uncompromising standard of performance and of training ethic that must have stemmed down from you, I guess. And did you ever feel like you had a little bit of pressure? I mean, Rick, as we know, he's an uncompromising guy, and I can imagine the fitness regimes would have been pretty tough, and he runs some pretty hard training sessions. And I can imagine sometimes you would probably want to stop like anyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And over the course of the journey, because I was there for 15 years and I'd had injuries, and motivation ebbs and flows. But I guess individually, you have to keep pushing yourself, because the whole philosophy was we increase the squad size, there's more competition within it. You can't rest on your laurels, even if you're a player that has been around for some time. There's other girls chasing you. And, you know, I worked on some of those areas that I knew I had the advantage, and one of them was fitness. I might not have been the fastest runner, certainly wasn't, but I could work on those strengths, and I prided myself on the fitness and was always within the top group for fitness. And that was something that I had to keep working on and making sure that I was leading the way in, because that was my strength. That was where I had an advantage, competitive advantage, and that was really true. Other girls, it was their sprinting. Other girls, it was, you know, they just worked really hard in training. Other girls off the field, they were meticulous in their preparation and the way they went about their diet. You know, they made sure that they ate very well. And then within the group internally, we went from my time in 85, where it was semi-professional, so it was a different era, but we went to being professional, but also everyone challenging each other. As Trini mentioned, it was tough and people would pull you into line. And the other thing was that people were starting to get fitter. Their skin folds were dropping. So this then meant that if, you know, the core group of girls had really low skin folds, then you couldn't be way up the other end of the spectrum because you would look silly. And so that competition within the group was very obvious and intense, but leading into an Olympic campaign that was necessary. And of course we had our times post-Olympics where we had, you know, a bit of a downtime and we weren't as fit and as fast and as drilled at training. And I look at post 96, most of us had a really good off season. Then we go to the Champions Trophy in Berlin in May, which was some 9 months later. And most of us, by our own admission, would say we were very much out of shape, and that we won it, and we had that call again, and we were good enough to get through it. But there was players, I know myself, I had a really average tournament, but then there's other players that could take up the slack. So that was another strength of ours. You didn't all have to be playing at your brilliant best for us to win. There could be, there was a spectrum, and you moved somewhere along that spectrum, but as long as there were about half the team playing at their best, then we were good enough to win. So that was a real advantage we had over other teams that didn't have that same level of that core group that went through of 8 or 10 players. They didn't have that luxury, and they relied on 2 or 3 superstars. So if they were having particularly poor games, then their side would struggle to win. So we could win even if we weren't at our very best, and that was a hallmark of the side.
Yeah, I think one thing that again, it's a Rick philosophy. That's kind of the first thing that I think of is the war of attrition sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess you can't hold that war of attrition without being, the fittest team out there, and looking across your results during the Olympic Games in particular. I mean, you guys ground teams down. Like there were games where you would be 0-0 or 1-1 or like in a deadlock for a long, long time, and then in the last 10 minutes it'd be like Australia scores a double to take a comfortable victory and those sorts of things. So you're obviously a very, very fit team, and what you're talking about means that you worked hard at it. But with that, I just want to talk about as well, it seems the way you talk about it just seems so like this amazing group of athletes who are incredibly driven, incredibly well motivated, came together, and it was the perfect storm. I mean, and it just seems like it was almost that luck would have it. All these people are in the one place, the one time, play the same sport. But I can't buy the fact that that luck was a big factor of it. You know what I mean? Like,
no,
yeah,
no, it's certainly having the depth. And let's look at it and break it down. We had a really good group of players that came into the system. Now, the problem we have now in sport, and if we look at why we were so successful, one, we did have that great mix of talented players, but now you have so many sports in Australia that it dilutes the talent pool in hockey, and that is a really big issue moving forward. So we had a lot of girls in our team that probably could have gone off and played AFL, for example, now, or played other sports that have now become quite popular. So that was the advantage that we had. They all played hockey because they were naturally talented athletes that could have really gone and done anything. So that really held us in good stead. But it was certainly I believe a group had mental constitution that was second to none, and because obviously Rick was a tough coach, and prior to that we had another coach who was extremely tough as well. And the weaker, and I hear that about the current generation of kids coming through, the millennials and the I generation, that they don't take well to criticism or someone raising their voice, and it's a generational thing. Oh, we were just yelled at, berated, and sometimes you're in tears. Sometimes I remember having conversations through the AIS with the assistant coach about how poorly I was being treated, but you found a way to get through it, and you did it, and you stayed in there, you hung in there, you didn't run away from it or shy away from it. And I think that is the big difference, that mental toughness that we had, that was born through our parents basically dropping us off at sport and just leaving us and letting us basically sink or swim, to now where kids are like, this is too hard, I'm going to give it away. And I believe that is a key difference, that we stuck it out through thick and thin. We had hard times, but we knew that we would come out the other side because our parents had educated us along those lines, that I'm going to drop you off and you will stay there and you will train until you finish. You're not going to not stop playing. And if they enrolled you in a sport for a season, you were going to play that season out. You were not going to say, I don't want to do this anymore. So it's certainly a generational change in the way kids think today, and I think that's a really big factor as well.
Interesting. Do you think that that philosophy could work nowadays?
Absolutely. I think, like anything, it's about changing mindset. And I think if you've got kids early in the piece and you really worked on that mindset aspect of the game, and this is how we get success. And we don't, coaches these days, and I look at it across all sports, they don't yell and berate, but there's still a case where you need to tell someone that they need to improve in certain areas, and some people don't take kindly to that. And I think it is an educational piece and setting the tone very early, and these are the standards that we expect, and sometimes it will be hard, and we don't yell and berate like the AFL coaches did in the 80s, but we still expect certain standards. If you don't meet them, then we're going to ask the question. So I really think it is about setting your standards, your tone, and that educational piece, because we need to tweak it, because it's not the same as it was in the 80s and 90s, but we still need to bring out the toughness in these kids, because I really believe that's what's lacking. And then it's excuses. That's what I'm finding. And there's a difference between whinging and moaning, which we all do in a team about a coach or a player, because that is just human nature. But when it's like, it's not my fault, it's someone else's, or we played really well, but we didn't quite get there because such, and they're excuses. So you might have played well, but you still didn't win the gold, or you still didn't get to where your target is. Then why didn't we do that, rather than, oh, we did pretty well? Well, did you really? And that's what I think has changed, that we need to not compromise, and we need to take ownership for our own performance and our team's performance. And if we didn't meet our expectations, then why not? Oh, we did pretty well. Well, did you? And that would be my question to the current crop.
Yeah. That's very, very interesting. I want to draw on some of your experience in that regard. Then you went to 4 Olympics, which is incredible. You won 3 gold medals, which is ridiculous. There was one Olympic Games in the middle, Barcelona, where you guys, it was a different format back then. It was cutthroat, really. The crossover, if you didn't perform well in the round games, there was no other chance. Like, there were no quarterfinals and semi-finals like there are now. It was just top 2 go through. And that was a disappointing Olympics for you. Is some of these learnings coming from the disappointment of Barcelona, or what happened there?
Certainly, you learn from your failures, as you know, and you scrutinise them more. What we often get asked is, why did you do so poorly in Barcelona? And it's hard to put your finger on it. Otherwise, you would make sure that you win all the time following that. But I think it was a number of factors. And one, our training regime was very mundane. So we did the same thing every day. We got bored. We ran, and it wasn't game-specific fitness training, which they do now. It was very much, you train, you're doing the same things, getting bored, then you would go for a run afterwards. So there was nothing creative about it. It was just a chore, and like a job that you work in every day and you absolutely hate it, and it's the same thing that you do every day. That's how it became. And I think when we finally got to Barcelona, we mentally weren't alive and fresh, and we hadn't had time to hadn't tapered. We just trained into the ground, got there, and we were frazzled, I think, both mentally and physically, and played like that. And there weren't too many games that we played well. We just played a really bland, boring game of hockey. And again, we talk about that core group. We had a number of players come through from Seoul and Barcelona, but no one really played at their very best. So again, you didn't have 6 to 8 players really lifting the rest of the team. And I think by most people's standards, there were a couple of players that probably played very well, but not many. There was inconsistency in results and performance. And I think that mental aspect of being really drained and not fresh and ready to go and hungry, that really comes home to me as one of the key factors. And the other thing is we go back to strategy, game plan. The same patterns that we played, easy for our opposition teams to read, didn't do anything unusual, didn't have any tricks up your sleeve that could create a bit of uncertainty in other teams. I mean, I think of the things we did in comparison going into Atlanta and Sydney were wet suits, the cooling vests. No other team around the world had them. These were those 1%ers that really gave us the edge, and they were very evident going into 96 and 2000, and not so much in the early years where it was just the status quo, continue on doing the same things, and we didn't have that innovation and that real thirst and hunger and drive to win and bring everyone along that journey with us.
So the first in Barcelona, I just want to finish off on the Barcelona thing. So the first few games went like losses and draws and these sorts of things, lost your chance to win back-to-back golds. But then in the 5th to 8th playoff, I mean, you wiped New Zealand off the park and then you smashed the Dutch. It was as if like the Hockeyroos had come out to play. Was there a shift in thinking in between the round games and the finals?
I think there was probably just a release of tension, and everyone went, well, we'll throw caution to the wind because we haven't met our expectations. It doesn't really matter if we finish 8th or we finish 5th, because who cares at the end of the day? So I think there was some of that. I think, we played with freedom, and there probably wasn't the tenseness from the coaching bench, which when they're tense and they're uptight, that then can flow across to the rest of the team. We also, as can happen, we had illness go through the team, and you can't make that as an excuse, because if half the team gets sick, well, they still have to play, but the other half need to make sure they rise above it, and those sort of things you've got to plan for, and they happen, and it might only be one game where that occurs, but then the rest of the tournament, there's no excuse. So those sort of things just meant that we had a pretty average tournament, but the mind set would have changed from those games where we were trying to get into a medal playoff to those final 2 games, because it didn't really matter. Sure. And the tension at ease, the coaches had relaxed, they played in different positions. And I guess that probably brings home the point of when you're preparing a team, there needs to be a sense of urgency and, a wanting to win, but also a calmness. There needs to be a sense of being calm. When you're on edge and you're too edgy and you can't come down, that's when things tend to not go so well. So I think you need to be ready to go and primed, but there needs to be a certain level of calm, and I think that's really important. And I know in our successful era, because we believed in our group, we were ready to go and fearless and determined, but there was a sense of calm as well once we stepped on that pitch, that you believed in that person next to you, you believed they had your back, and we could do this, and we stick to our structures and our game plan. We can tweak it if we need to. We're not doing the status quo, the same thing over and over again. If something's not working, we can shift and change it. And I think having that system where you could adapt depending on the opposition was really important, and relying on everyone in the group, not just a couple of key players. And that's the advantage we had over the other teams. They had 3 or 4 superstars, but we had some superstars, but a team that could all contribute. And for mine, that was a really big factor, that once that interchange rule came in and we could just rotate through our group, then of course what you talked about, overrunning the teams. Well, we had the energy, and the other teams, Korea, one of the best teams that ever played, 1996 Atlanta Olympic Games, a 5-5 result in the
Crazy.
round game. It was a super match. It was brilliant. And we were exhausted. But they're superstars. By the end, when they get to the final, they're absolutely exhausted. So all of those strategies just all coming together helped create the success.
Sure. I just want to pick up on that tension piece. The way you and Trini talk about the team during the 90s, it sounds like an incredibly tense place at training. I mean, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy between you guys being so on each other about like striving to succeed and all these sorts of things, and just like creating this, incredible tension. But then you also talk about having each other's back. And I guess that probably comes out more in the tournaments and the games, as you mentioned.
Correct.
So it seems as if once you actually got onto the pitch or got to the tournament, the tension kind of dissipated and just this calm was left. Is that a fair comment or not really?
I think that's a fair comment. And I think that comes from setting some core values for the group that we needed to adhere to. And we had a mission statement going into 96, and there were like 10 commandments really that we all needed to follow. And, in the workplace, in any team environment, you don't all get on, and you have your little pockets of groups and things like that. But there were things like continually challenging yourself to go beyond your comfort zone. And you might not like everyone in the group, but you need to respect everyone. And I think you've come across a really key point in that the respect was there. So we believed in ourselves individually, in the strategy of the team, and we knew that we could take anyone on any given day. And what there might have been that competitive edginess at training and a bit of snitchiness off, but once that whistle blew, we had respect for everyone on the pitch that played for Australia, because we knew that they could do the job. We believed in them, and they had your back, like you said, and you had theirs, because there was that team strategy there. We knew the game plan, and we knew each other could do the job and slip into variety of positions and still be able to perform. And I think that respect piece is really, really important.
I've got a question about the team dynamic versus individual flair. You guys are obviously a fantastic team, and you say you didn't have the superstars of the other team, but you did really. Like, you had some incredible players.
We certainly had superstars, and I guess what I meant is we didn't rely on them as much as other teams. We still had superstars. I mean, Alison, for mine, is still the greatest female hockey player of all time, without doubt. And I talk about others, and they're revered, like Luciana Amer, and she was brilliant, but I still believe Alison was better because she could break lines and take anyone on. So we still had those superstars, and our game plan, probably similar to something like you went through with Rick, was based on solid defence. And if you had your solid defence and you had that covered, then once you got over that half line, then the flair could come out, and playing counter-attacking hockey was obviously a core part of our game plan. And so, that our game was built on the solid defence, and we had some brilliant defenders there that held that back line together. And then once you got into an attacking phase, then that flair could come out. And we certainly had, you spoke to Trini, she was an incredible goal scorer, and then we had Nikki Hudson, who, for mine, reflecting back on Sydney, I think she was one of our most important players, scored 10 goals, was just on fire, but was a real impact player in that particular games. And others will go on and say some others play better, but for mine, she was up there because she just had such a great impact. So we certainly had superstars, but then there's unsung heroes. Like we had Julie Towers, who was a younger player and played more probably a cameo role, but her skills were exceptional, and then just chimed in and scored goals when she was needed to. And Angie Skirving had just come into the team and was absolutely brilliant as a halfback. And so these players that were unsung heroes but just came of age, it was quite incredible, really, because they knew they had other players that had their back, and so they could rise to the occasion.
It sounds like there was a real culture of, well, I guess the respect piece comes into it, but people felt like they were free to express themselves in your team.
They were, and that philosophy of, being very solid at the back and then having the creative flair, and that's why, they were strikers, the Trinis, the Nickies of this world, because they did have that creative flair and that reflected their personalities. And at times they could do some freakish things, but they had that license to do that. But, they come back and tackle in defence, and they needed to be sure and on their game, because they would certainly hear the wrath of the coaching staff or some of those senior defenders if and they came back and created caused a penalty corner or something like that. So, it was very much based on a solid foundation of defence, and then your creativity was allowed to flow once you got into the attacking zone.
Now I'm going to briefly interrupt here to introduce a feature of the show. We'll call it our Hero of Hockey segment. We know that community sport flourishes on the back of hard-working volunteers who give up their time and effort simply for the love of it. And we want to give you, the listener, the opportunity to contact us and tell us who deserves to be our hero of hockey for the week. Tell us who they are, what club they're from, and what they've done for the sport, and we'll give them and your club a shout out. So get in touch via our socials, and your nominee could be chosen for the next episode. This week, we've got not one, but two heroes of hockey. The Skippings duo from the mighty Tigers Hockey Club in Darwin, Northern Territory. Over many years, Kelly and Skip have contributed to both Tigers and more broadly to Darwin hockey in general by lending a helping hand to just about anything hockey related. Whether it be coaching seniors or juniors, umpiring, or helping out on committees, both Kel and Skip are always there, ready to help out. Hailing from a club that has produced the likes of Joel Carroll, Des Abbott, and Brooke Paris, both Kel and Skip were exceptional hockey players in their own right, representing the Northern Territory across numerous age groups. And they're also the only husband and wife to win the Darwin Hockey Best and Fairest in the same season. Between them, they've coached the Northern Territory Pearls, the Tigers A and C grade women, umpired both the men's and women's A grade, played A grade, played AHL, umpired at a national level, coached the Northern Territory under 18 and under 13 girls, coached the under 11 and under 17 Tigers boys, been regulars on the Tigers committee, and Kelly is in her third term of presidency at the Tigers Hockey Club. Now, it should be noted that Skip is currently coaching the Tigers A-grade women, which means he coaches Kelly, and he says he enjoys being the boss for a few hours per week. Amidst all that, they've got 3 kids, Travis, Leo and Ella, who all play for the Tigers, and as any hockey parent could tell you, orchestrating training and match drop-offs for 3 kids is a big enough handful as it is, and they do this in conjunction with everything else. Pretty awesome. So, to the Skippings duo, cheers. Thanks for all your work. Now it's back to Rechelle, who talks debut, injuries, and what compelled her to take some time away from the sport after winning gold in 1996. I started this interview wanting to find out a little bit more about you and tell your story. We've ended up on an absolute masterclass of high performance, and I'm pretty grateful for that. I do want to briefly touch on you and your journey. You talk about your Julie Towers and Angie Skirvings. That was you. In 1985, you made your debut. I think you were 18 at the time.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Do you remember how you got the phone call, or how did you find out?
Yes, I remember that vividly, actually. I tell the story because I was 18, as you mentioned, and it was a pretty incredible ride because I played under 21 Australian hockey, but I hadn't played for the state WA women's team. And I get a phone call out of the blue. The lecturer had tracked me down, and it was pretty hard in those days. They got a landline number. I was babysitting at the time, and I got the call up saying that you'll play a test series against Germany in Australia. And I was very shocked by that and very grateful, but I didn't realise this was going to happen quite so soon. And then, I started my training in earnest with the Australian team, and it was a rocky ride, to say the least. Young 18-year-old coming into a team with a group of players who had been there for some time, were very set in their ways. It wasn't an easy journey trying to fit in. And I remember coming back after training over the course of a couple of weeks and going, wow, this is tough. They're really... They put you through the paces. They were quite bitchy and quite hard to get on with. And a young girl, you think, wow, this is great. I'm in the team, but it's tough. And the journey was up and down, I have to say, and got injuries along the way, compartment syndrome, that really set me back early in the piece. And I had an operation in 86 and then another one in 89. And I really didn't start to play good hockey until 89, when I was free of injury and started to make, and maturity too, I was a bit older, but make a bit more of a mark. And those first few years a bit of a blur, because it was pretty hard going and pretty difficult to overcome and mentally very challenging. And sometimes you think, is it all worth it? You have one operation, think that's going to work, and then you subsequently have to have another one. And there was like a 3 to 4 year gap between, so it was pretty challenging to stay in there. And I had times where I was very dark and didn't know if this is what I wanted, and had coaches basically tell me that I was struggling and I would be very lucky to continue playing for Australia. So you go through some pretty dark, challenging times, and it's the support around you. It's whether you really want it badly enough, and the lengths you'll go to overcome any hurdles that you have in your way.
It's easy to kind of gloss over that when you look at your career as a whole. I mean, 279 games and I guess a 15-year career, 16 years maybe. In those times, I know one thing that Rick was famous for saying was, if you're injured to me, then you're useless, basically. I remember that was something that he said. Yeah. That can be a really difficult thing for someone to hear when, like, you're out for an extended period of time. And I know the environment you created in the 90s was tense, and it was exciting, and it was it was great. But when you're injured, I can imagine it would be very, very difficult. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So my compartment syndrome, luckily, thankfully for me, happened prior to Rick coming on board, but it was still very difficult and challenging to overcome. And the coaching staff do have their doubts about you, and especially when it's an injury that it's not a broken leg, you can't see it. Is it real? Are you making it up? Is it a weakness in your mental ability to be able to play at that highest level? So that was certainly a challenge, and I had to seek out some really good people in my life, some other coaches, family, friends, to get through it. And there was some dark times, and again, you had to look at the bigger picture of, where do I want to head? Do you really want this? Yes, I really want this. What do I have to do to get there? You have to do the rehab, you have to go through these ops, you have to be meticulous in making sure that your rehab is of the highest standard, otherwise you might not come back. So all of those things needed to be put in place to make sure that I got back there. And then fortunately, when Rick came on in 93, I was pretty much on my way, but I had a couple of injuries along the way, but nothing too substantial. I wasn't a fast runner, so I didn't do my hamstrings very often, only once or twice. And I remember during the Olympic campaign, and Rick, as you mentioned, was very cautious about injuries, because if you're injured, then you're no good to the team. So if they push it too much and you overdo it, and you might have a niggle, and then you rip your hammy off your bone, then you're going to be out for an extended period of time. So I remember in the course of the Olympic campaign, I got hit in the calf against Argentina in the round game, and they very cautiously said, you're not going to play the next day. And I would have been fine to play, and I accepted the decision, but I would have preferred to play that game against Korea, but it was their undertaking that, no, we need to be cautious in our response. And if you went into that game and then made the injury worse, then you wouldn't be playing off towards the end of the tournament. So I'd accept that, but it was certainly a challenge because you kind of know your own body, and I thought I'd be perfectly fine, but I had to sit out that, and that was really frustrating and challenging. And you sort of had that discussion with Rick, and I'll be fine, and then he consults with the physio, but in the end, you never seem to win out. The coaches and the staff seem to have their way. So that was really challenging during the height of the Olympic tournament. To have to miss a game was really difficult. And then you think, next game, am I going to be all right? Will I be okay? And I had to, like anyone in an elite sport, stay up all night, 24 hours, icing it on and off. And it's like you get through those tough times. But in the end, worked out, and we were rewarded for our effort.
And what do you hold on to in those tough times? What gets you through?
Gets me through is I reflect back on those sand hills at Swanbourne, the running up Kings Park, the yelling at training, the early morning runs, the games that we'd play at Curtin Hockey Stadium, and then go for a 6-kilometre run straight after that, and it's meant to be a light run to recover, but everyone's so competitive they're sprinting the last kilometre. Those are the things that get me through it, because I know that you're just not going to you're going to make sure that all of that hard work is not in vain, and that's what gets you through it. And otherwise, if you didn't have all of that to reflect on and to push you to go to the next level, then it'd be really hard. And you just say, oh, I'm not going to ice my leg for 24 hours. I'll just sit here and, eat some chips and watch TV, whatever. But yeah, you know what the end game is and how much it means to you. So you're going to push yourself to do whatever you can. And of course, you've got to have support networks. You don't have a support network and people that you will give you good advice, not just say what you want to hear, but challenge you at times and let you know that you might not have done your rehab as well as you should. That these things are really important.
After 1996, you spent a little bit of time away from the sport. People might not know that, and I'm not sure how long it was. Actually, I can't find much on it. Would you mind talking through a little bit about that whole experience for you?
Look, I think just needed a little bit of a break, and I remember saying to Rick, don't need to go on every tournament, because there was the philosophy that you'd have pretty much the main core group, and I was going on every single tournament. I was going to every single time we went away, Australian team, whether it's a test series or a tournament. And I said to him in a meeting that it'd be great not to have to go to every tournament. And there were things like we'd win the Australian Team of the Year post-Olympics, and I'd say, can someone else go and do that? I just needed a bit of a break mentally and physically to really, didn't have too long out of the game, but just didn't go on every tournament and didn't go to every event. And I said, can the vice captain go and accept that award? Because I just really don't want to go to everything. And I was a captain that didn't need to be at every media conference or go to every awards ceremony, because I didn't need to be front and centre, I guess. And so that was really important to me as well, to make sure that we shared the leadership and had everyone feel valued. And yeah, it's always hard in a team sport, as you know, captain, and they're often the ones that are pushed out into the limelight. And there's no question that teammates can get really annoyed with that sort of thing as well. So you've got to be mindful. I think you've got to be able to read the play a little bit and give everyone a bit of an opportunity. And I guess that's why we went to a leaderful team and bring everyone along and make sure everyone's a self-starter and they try and bring out their leadership qualities.
Did you go to training during that period?
Yeah, I did. I trained, but I just made sure that I didn't have as many commitments, and I wasn't loaded up as much, and I just had a little bit of little bit of downtime so I could reflect and think, clearly, and do some other things, just have a bit of a social life and look at some other opportunities. And what I will say is I went back and studied in 97, so that took up a lot of my time. So I made sure that, I didn't go to every tournament. I remember going to the Singapore Sixers in Singapore and just having some time out. And I actually just went to watch, and then I got dragged into playing. And and then I was meant to go on a holiday post that, but I had to get back for uni. I was that sort of worried about not passing uni, so I went and did a postgrad in marketing. So there was a post 96, a bit of downtime, and I could get away from hockey for a bit.
Why did you feel it was important to do some study during that period?
Just needed to set myself up and make sure I had options when I finished playing sport, and it's really important. Some sports, professional, they don't need it, but our sport we do. So I'd done a Bachelor of Education in Teaching. I taught in the early years before we went full-time in 96. And then in that downtime in 97, I decided, to do that degree, and that was really, really beneficial. I really enjoyed that. It was good to just have something else to look forward to, and to think differently, and not to think about training and the games and your opposition and all of the homework that needs to go into sport these days. And it was just really lovely to have that downtime. It's really good.
For sure. Speaking of commitments, in 2000, you weren't just there as an athlete. You read the athlete's oath as well. Yes. And I remember I was 5 at the time, and I knew and I knew 2 players who played hockey, period, and they were Alison Allen and Rechelle Hawkes. So you really, and we didn't know much about hockey at the time or anything like that, but you and Alison, I guess, really transcended the hockey bubble and into becoming a household name and those sorts of things. Compare that experience of 2000. I mean, you've played 270 games. You've been a captain for nearly 10 years. You're the oath bearer, all this sort of stuff. And then in 1988, you were fresh-faced, first Olympics, all that sort of thing. Can you compare the 2 experiences and the pressure that came with either of those?
Yeah, so the pressure in 88 was a little bit different in that was my first Olympic campaign, and you're very unsure of the Olympics and how it all works, and you're very excited, and you go to the Olympic Village, and one of the first people I see is Steffi Graf, the great tennis, riding a push bike through the village garden and thinking, wow, that's incredible. And so there's that sense of excitement, the sense of the unknown, how's this all going to play out, and also you're an emerging player, but you're not kind of the integral player of the team. So there's a kind of a different role that I think was played back then, because we had the substitution rule, and it was very much about your core team, and unless you were in there, you were generally sitting on the bench. So the 88 experience was very much a learning curve. Sitting on the bench, played some games, but would have to start generally, and then come off, and one of the more senior players would come on. So I had a taste of it. So a very different experience, just a young kid with a dream, hoping to get some game time, and then to Sydney, had a leadership role along the way. Knew it was my last campaign, knew that I needed to perform. And whilst Sydney I played pretty consistent. It wasn't my best tournament of all time, but there were some games where I really did step up, and I think that was important, because, like I said before, if you've got 6 to 8 of your core group really stepping up, and that's what happened during the course of that campaign. There was always 6 to 8 that were really playing well at the time, and they dragged the team along. And we had some, pretty flat sort of games. Opening game against GB, we struggled to win that. Then we had games against Spain where we peppered the goals and couldn't put it in the back of the net. New Zealand were tough. So it wasn't all smooth sailing, but I remember the game against Spain lifted, game against New Zealand, I really lifted, and then the round game against Argentina, I really lifted as well. So there were 3 games where sort of set the tone. Didn't play so well in the opening game against GB. And then the final, it was a bit of a dour struggle. It wasn't the best, prettiest, as you know, a lot of the finals are. It wasn't the prettiest game in the world. It was a grind, the war of attrition. We just overran them in the end. And I played pretty okay, but not a great game. I didn't get a lot of touches. So the experience, though, along the way was very much you're more one of the integral part of the team. You've got a leadership role. It's your last Olympic campaign. You've won the oath. This is back-to-back gold medals. So a completely different feeling where you're more entrenched within the team, and you know you've got a responsibility to the team and to perform as well as you possibly can.
How do you get the most out of your teammates if you're not getting a lot of those touches? How do you have an impact?
Yeah, with communication, getting into the right position, the running you do off the ball, the tackling, seeing if you can get possessions that way, because sometimes you're not in a game. The game seems to go around you, whether it's because someone's marking you closely or the positions that you're playing, or the game's played in a different way than it normally would, and you're in the midfield and it's sort of bypassing you or going around you. So, yeah, it's about that mindset and getting yourself geared up and you know, having some key phrases. I'm sure you use key phrases as well, but mine was very much, if I wasn't in the game, move, trap, pass. Very simple, but you got to move, you got to trap, you got to pass. And I found over the journey, when I wasn't playing well, I would tend to head towards the sidelines to get the easy receive rather than get it, you know, like many do, rather than get it in the congested spaces. And when you're playing well, you're on fire, it's instinct, you just trap it, you get it from anywhere, and you seem to be able to dish it off or take people on. So they were my sort of key words that I said to myself. Didn't always work, but I think the one thing that I'm proud of over the journey is I played pretty consistent hockey and didn't have too many bad games, and that's one thing that I hold dear to me.
And that's the secret, just move, trap, pass, keep it simple.
That was me. Yeah, very simple. Keep it simple and just get yourself back into the game. And you know yourself, you know how many touches you kind of normally get in a game and how many each, you know, quarter now, but each half I'd be getting. And if I was way down on that, I knew there was something wrong. And mentally, sometimes you're just having a bad game. I think back to club hockey and having just a shocker and you're mistrapping, and you know there's something that's led to that in your preparation, the lead up mentally, something went wrong, or you didn't get enough sleep, or your diet wasn't quite right. But there's things you can do in a game to try and improve it, even though you're not going to have the best game that you've ever had.
2000. Yep. There's a quote that says you just didn't want to train anymore, and that's why it was time. Certainly you talking about training and that sort of thing, I can really understand that after 15 years of that, you'd be pretty ready to go. That was the right time?
Yeah, definitely the right time. And you can't, you know, if you can pick a way to go out, because you can't always do that. People don't always have that luxury. So I was able to pick the right time, and many of the players did. You can't go past a home Olympic Games. They come around every 50 to 100 years. We won gold, and I reflect back and say it was the right time, and the body was starting to wear out a little bit, and the pace wasn't getting any quicker, and it was perfect timing. And then I look at what happened post Sydney, and I was so glad that I bowed out then, because timing is everything, and yeah, I'm really satisfied with that.
Absolutely. And the way you talk about, I guess, hockey now, once you retired, you went into a whole bunch of sporting roles. So working with the Perth Glory, and you work as a consultant, and you're a mentor. You're the mentor to one of our co-captains, Aaron Zalewski. And I know he leans on you for a lot of guidance, and he couldn't ask for a better mentor. Hockey is obviously in your bones, in your blood, and just talking to you, you obviously still care a lot about it. But you are somewhat detached from hockey at the moment. Is there interest in getting back in, and especially with the Hockeyroos side of things?
Yeah, look, I guess I'm a bit like that. That's a personality type of
Mm.
mine. I am pretty quiet and reserved, unless I'm around friends. But it was sort of a deliberate thing because I just wanted to go and explore other opportunities in my life. And the other thing was obviously I had two children who are now
Mm.
17 and 15, and I wanted to be a mum. And I travelled like the Hockeyroos and the Kookaburras do. We were away, 6 months or more of the year, and just wanted to be settled at home and try and be a good mum. And now they're a bit older, just trying to explore other opportunities. But in saying that, I've kept an eye on both the Kookaburras and the Hockeyroos, and at times I've been involved in various committees, and I coach my kids. So the commitments that I've had plus the coaching of my children has meant that I haven't been able to perhaps coach at a higher level. I did coach club hockey one season for Vic
Mm.
Park
Mm.
with Shane Tolkien, but then I just found it too challenging. The kids were a lot younger. I'd see them at the top of the grandstand at the hockey stadium while the game was on, and I thought, oh my goodness, they're going to fly off the edge. So it just became too difficult. But I think the problem that women have in coaching is they have children and they away from their families for too long. It is really difficult, and that's why we don't have as many females coaching in hockey as we would like. And I am passionate about it, and I really get into it once I'm into it. But I found the commitment. I coached my daughter's team last year, and just the commitment is huge. And then you're working full time and doing other things. It does wear down after a while. So that's why I kind of taken a bit of a back seat, and I pick and choose. I might have a season off and then I go back and coach. And that's the real reason why I haven't got into elite coaching and been more on committees and done things like that.
You've had 15 years of, well, more than that in elite sport. I guess most of your life has been in elite sport. But you've also, as I said, forged a successful career after hockey. And with the lessons that came from sport, I'm really interested to hear how they've translated to life after sport.
Yeah, so I think in the workplace, it's being able to relate to a diverse group of people, whether in a small business, medium or large, and work out conflict resolution skills, I think are really important. You solve problems and your conflict. You have conflict within your workplace, within your sport, and you have to know how to work through those. So I think conflict resolution skills are really important, being able to problem solve and being able to work in a larger environment where you're dealing with different personality types, I think is really important as well. So yeah, there's a lot of challenging things in the workplace, and I think sport, there's a lot of similarities. And if you can take some of those problem solving skills, conflict resolution, the leadership, being able to show people the way and take people along your journey, I think there's some of the key message. And of course, in most businesses these days, work ethic. I mean, you need to have it to survive.
Well, I do have a few more quick questions to finish. That's typically what I do. I would love to get in depth with so much more because, as I said, there is just so much in your head that I'd like to know, and I think everyone should know. But just quickly to finish, I'll do some quick questions at the end. Hopefully, don't require a lot of thought. We've already covered who's the best player you think you've ever played with in Alison Annan. That was hands down. I mean, there's a jury out at the moment between the greatest of all time between Luciana Amar and Alison Annan, but you've said no, easily Alison.
Yeah, easily, in my opinion. And there's others that have been involved in the game subsequently since Sydney, and they've seen her play. But from commentating and seeing vision, I believe Alison was. Yep.
Sure. Best player you've ever played against?
Oh, that's a really good question. There's as I said, there was a couple of Dutch players that were brilliant. Britta Becker was pretty good from Germany. She would have been up there, and Luciana as an opponent, she would have been up there as well.
What made Becker so good?
She was really tall, yet agile. She had a change of pace, really good skills, and she had that X factor where she could really lift her team.
Did she play through the midfield?
She was in the midfield.
So you marked her a fair bit.
Yeah, so I watched her play and really good skills, and really admired the way she went about her work. She was really good.
How do you? Sorry, I'm going on a bit, but how do you come up and how do you prepare to play against someone like that, or was it a matchup that you looked forward to and you're like, I'm going to beat you today? Yeah,
it was certainly a matchup, and you looked at their strengths and where she would generally drag the ball, and you try and match up against that. You try and get into her head a little bit and make sure you're marking really tight, and she didn't really like that. And there were a lot of sort of bits of research that you did to make sure that you overcame some of those strengths that she had, and going in and just having a little dossier on them of strengths and weaknesses, and then getting in their face, getting in their grill, marking them really tightly. It was really, I think, a way. She didn't like the tight marking, hard checking, and I really enjoyed the battles actually.
Sounds like you just beat her up a little bit.
Yeah, probably. Probably.
Okay, 1988, 1996, and the 2000 gold medal winning team. Who would win?
That is an extremely difficult question. It would be between 96 and 2000. And I've had some people say to me, some writers say that they thought the team in 96 played better and was more consistent. Or I'll tell you what, it'd be line ball. It would be line ball. I would have to say it's sitting on the fence, but it depends on the given day how I think it'd be line ball between the two teams, because it was you had a pretty consistent teams throughout, and there were only a few different faces. So I'd say we would have
been a good matchup. Shootouts?
It would have been 5-5 draw, I reckon.
What were the main differences, you think? Like, were they different strengths and weaknesses, or pretty much the same team?
Pretty much the same team, but there were different rules in 96 to 2000. So I think from memory, because going back a bit, I think offside was still in then, I think. And then, I think after that, there was no offside. So there was a lot more getting the ball in behind. You could throw the ball in behind and use. If I reflect back, you use your skills a lot more, threw the ball in behind. Now the game is very much a passing game. So if I was to go on the sort of game plan I like better, it was about getting in behind and taking things on and slipping those little balls into the right or left wing that they could just run through. But in saying that, offside was difficult to play with as well, because it was the whistle would always blow, and this was no offside was used to open up the game. But I really like that, where you throw a ball and run right in behind, and you don't really get that in this day and age because of the elongation and the passing that goes on.
It seems like our assistant coach Anthony Potter talks about the weighted pass, and it seems like it's gone out of the game a little bit, but it would have been everywhere during the offside era.
Yeah, brilliant back then. And that little weighted pass where you used a bit of disguise. I love that sort of thing. It was awesome.
Who was your favourite to pass to? Did you have a really good connection? I mean, you played in the midfield, good distributor.
Yeah, probably, let me try and think. Pass to, I didn't mind passing to Jackie Pereira. She was one of our best goal scorers. And I reckon Alison was pretty good. And then I reckon Nikki Hudson would be the other. Yeah.
Last question. Do you have a favourite moment in your career?
I think the Olympic Games has to be the pinnacle, but a moment in a game was, I think, the World Cup in Utrecht in 1998. There were 10,000 Dutch people in the crowd, and we won that game 3-2 with a goal just before the siren. And in terms of intensity and the crowd going wild and not being able to hear your teammates, that will go down as one of the greatest games I've ever played in. Yeah.
Awesome. What a note to finish on. Rechelle, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honour to have you on the show. I know you're busy. Thank you for giving up your time.
Thank you so much.
Big thank you to the production team of David Moore, Tim Collier and Jimmy Stevens. If you do like the Help Side, please like, subscribe, interact. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at the Help Side on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. That's it for now. We'll catch you on the Help Side next time.